House to Home, presented by Remax Diamond Realty.
Okay, it has been a month now. This is part 4 of our continuing series on how you can get that perfect real estate deal. Frictionless, no drama, no stress, good for the family. The kids approve, the wife approves, the husband approves, whatever like that. Liz and Gina are in here. And ladies, we are now in part 4, which is the last installment of this, because now we're talking about people have gotten their finances in order. They've met with the bank. They've chosen a really good realtor. They've actually kind of like taken a look at the properties, see what's out there, what's on the market, and now it's the offer to be made, right? Is this the most is this the most difficult part, or is this the negotiation part, or is this the art of bartering? Or
this is the critical part, because your offer will go to the seller, and depending on how you craft your offer could make or break whether they accept your deal or not.
Is it typically just like a one-time thing, or because I think they call that the I'm not a poker player, but I know many people that are into, and some people like, okay, start low, they'll gradually move up high. Is it a game of cat and mouse, or is it like one-time shot?
No, I think between Gina and myself, we normally, if we're working with a buyer, we'll look at what is the market right now. Is it in demand? And even before we write up the offer, we'll do our market analysis just to see what that property market value would be. And then also we kind of have a feel for, are we going to be competing? And at that point, we would advise our buyer that it's a hot market. If it is a hot market, then we'd say, hey, you would be competing. These are the values that we came up with. How much do you really like this property? And I usually say, well, if you lost it for $5,000, would you kick yourself? Or would you want to go the distance? So it's just a question of the individual buyer. What are they comfortable with? And will they go the distance? Because if they really like the property and lost it because they didn't compete, or we didn't advise them that it's competition, and they lost it, who are they going to look at? They start to say, well, you didn't advise me properly. So Gina and I are very careful about that to make sure we guide them. And it's a question of, are they going to listen to us or not? Right,
So,
Gina?
this isn't like a boxing match. I'm using a sports analogy, right? Where you're kind of like carrying each other. And then, ultimately when you get into the later rounds, that's when you go for the knockout. In this case, the best way to handle this transaction, the best strategy is basically to make your best offer first, right?
Well, the best strategy is to know who you're up against, right? So you can't really fight a good fight if you don't know who the competition is or what you're competing against. So, in the beginning, when we were selecting the properties, when I go out, if I'm already starting to show properties to my customers, I'm also already showing them what the area is selling for. What was the last house that sold in that neighborhood, or if it's land? Okay, let's look at the property, and here's what has sold in the area, because that's where you fight a good fight. You already know what's going on. You know what the competition is capable of doing. And then the next step is, before I even write up an offer, while I'm showing the property, I would have already called the agent and said, hey, I'm going to go show it. I just want to know, has your seller rejected any offers? Have you gotten offers? Are you expecting offers? You got to know what the situation is so that you could give all of that advice to the buyer when they're looking. Some buyers don't want to be in a competitive situation, because I always tell people, if you're competing with somebody else, you're not making an offer anymore. You're bidding with somebody. For a seller, it's going to be the highest. And it isn't always that. I mean, now this is a completely different scenario, but when I'm working with sellers, it isn't always the highest offer that you should take, because, there's different types of strategies out there. And sometimes, I do tell my buyers, okay, you want to be competitive. You're looking at the comps, and the comps tell you the number is here. But I've just spoken to the listing agent, and she's telling me that this is what's going on. Where do you want to be? And then part of getting that your good offer accepted is letting the listing agent know in advance, hey, we know what the situation is. My buyer understands what's going on, and this is what they're prepared to do to win. With negotiations, there's all kinds of factors that go into play.
I mean, if the bank approved you for 300,000, you might as well bid 300,000, right?
Well, it depends. Sometimes they want to go the distance and sometimes they don't. But again, it will be subject to the market. But not only is price the factor when Gina and I put together the documentation and the offer, there are certain contingencies that we place in the offer. And one of them could be that the offer is subject to appraisal. It could be subject to inspection. So we put in safety catchers in that document, subject to appraisal, subject to their inspection, interior and physical inspection of the property, subject to making sure that the boundary points are within the government standards. And so there are things that we place in that documentation that is critical. So for example, if we submitted an offer for 500,000, but the offer, the property only appraised at 450,000, what happens next? So those are critical factors to discuss, that if it doesn't hit the appraisal value, what then? Are you willing to pay the difference, or are you willing to stick with whatever that appraisal values that is reflected in the appraisal? So,
I know
yes.
A lot of people have told me, some of the feedback I've gotten from our show here has been that they say the word offer to them kind of conveys the fact that this might be like an auction. So, start low and go up and up and up and up. But like you said, Gina, sometimes if you do get into a bidding war, that can be scary territory.
Well, Jace, if you know in advance, for instance, if I've called the listing agent and she, he or she tells me we're expecting 2 or 3 offers. So if you already know that as the buyer, and I come to you, Jace, say, Jace, I know how badly you want this house and you will be competing with other people, then the strategy to start low and work your way up, you may not get the benefit of that strategy because you turned in an offer, let's say at 400, the other 2 offers at 425 or 430. The seller, I can't see a reason why the seller would come back to you when there's that much of a difference and say, hey, Jason, I've got 2 other offers that are better than yours, but I really like you. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a counter instead of countering the other 2 people. You're not going to get that opportunity. So
you're talking about $20,000, which is a good sum of money.
Yeah. I mean, for the seller, that could be the difference in whether or not you get a response. And what I find is in a situation like that, where you were going with a strategy of start low and they'll counter me and give me the real price they want. If you're already competing with other people, that strategy is not a good one.
Mm-hmm. Or sometimes, Jason, what the seller would do, if let's say they got 3 offers, pretty competitive, what they could do is do a multiple counter. And the multiple counter could reflect 2 things. Either they have a flat fee where they say, I'm countering you at, let's say, 475, for example. And then the 3 have the opportunity to submit 475, or the counter could be, give me your best offer. And then all parties, one could do 450, one could do 460, one could do 480. And of course, at that point, the seller could decide, well, this is the best offer. And I think the strategy is the less contingency sometimes would bring you a better acceptance.
Because for all you know, the seller may want to say, like, I'm just taking the highest of the three offers, and I'm going with that because I've got other things to do. I may have multiple properties. I've got a kid that needs to go to college. I may have a life that I need to tend to, and that's a huge risk, I guess.
It could be that, but if Gina and I are representing you, the seller, then we will give you our pointers, and that's another show in itself. Gina and I will go
I said over the seller, I meant the buyer.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Jason, this, I think for me, this is where you are going to spend. People think showing properties, you spend the most time. I don't think so. I think when you start negotiating, when the buyer has really decided, okay, I want this property or that property, the negotiations, this part, putting it all in writing, getting it all signed, this is where you should spend most of your time, the bulk of the time, because negotiations, it's not just about the price. There's so many factors here. We, as listing agents, we've gotten offers where we have sat down with the seller and said, the seller will ask multiple questions, and one of them would be, well, what are the chances that this is going to go to closing? I know these agents, agent 1, agent 2, agent 3, and the seller would say, I feel more confident with agent 2. What do you think? That's a tricky question. What is your goal? I mean, the negotiations is the hardest part of this. I think it's not the hardest, but where you should spend the most time counseling together, knowing what your buyer desires, knowing what your buyer expects out of you, determining what your buyer's goal might be. And then from there, you start negotiating and feeling out the listing agent to see how you could get this done, how you can nail it for your buyer.
And I guess if you want to think like pragmatically, you put so much time in the previous 3 steps that we've discussed in this series into that, meeting with the bank, choosing a realtor, shopping around and everything like that. You've gotten to this point, finish strong. Do what you got to do to get that deal done.
Yeah. The other pointer is if a seller is looking at, let's say, 3 buyers, and one buyer is, you want to look as well as the strength of the buyer. So if your buyer is putting in half cash versus the other buyers, these are factors that the seller will look at as well. So crafting your offer to submit to a potential seller would be critical as far as they want to look at what is, as Gina puts it, what are the chances of this particular buyer moving forward? And if they're 50% cash and the loan amount is much less, that could be a stronger buyer. Again, it's all dependent on what the seller looks at.
Okay.
Let me give you an example. Let me give you just a quick example, Jace. I've got a listing that needs work. It's really hard to finance or impossible to finance. Okay, I say hard because I'm trying to be kind. It's impossible to finance. So when agents come to me and they submit an offer and it says this offer is contingent on a loan, and our sellers are sophisticated, and for those who aren't, they haven't been around the block that many times, so they're going to ask us questions, and they say, Gina, is this offer possible? They're getting a loan. I don't know of a loan that's possible for this type of property. We've discussed that, Mr. Seller. In the beginning, I told you it's most likely has to be cash deals. So when you're representing your buyer and you're submitting an offer like that, you can't just submit an offer on paper that says a contingent on a loan without backing it up somehow. You got to call the listing agent. So if we're representing the buyer, we have to call the listing agent and say, hey, I know on paper this doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere, but this is why it will. We have A, B, C, D done already. We're good. And you pitch your offer. That's part of representing your buyer.
And it's all in the pitch.
It's all in the pitch.
Yeah,
that's right.
You are sold the property. You've also got to sell your ability to want to buy that, right?
But Jason, pitch is critical, but also backing it up with facts. So if the money is there, it's all in the money. It's all in the factors in crafting that offer that show this is possible, because there are many ways to look at it. There's solutions to a situation.
And ladies, I guess we can wrap this episode and our series on this by maybe giving some people some sage words of wisdom in all the years that you've both been doing real estate on Guam, because the light at the end of the tunnel, you're almost to the finish line. I'm using every sports analogy I know, right? Are those little dangling keys. You're almost there. What can you tell people about, like how they have to stay the course and, make sure that they do everything in sequence that we've been talking about over the last 4 episodes to really make sure that they close this deal to their satisfaction?
I would say trust the process and put your money where your mouth is. Trust the process and put your money where your mouth is. Nice. So you have one theoretical and one practical.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing I've come to understand. We don't sell real estate. We help people, we help them close their transactions. So I find that when somebody is absolutely ready, when they've decided they're ready, we don't have to do much. We're there for advice and guidance, and that's about it. They do the rest. Nice. Okay. And if your heart is set on it, you will make it happen. Like we said, finding the right property is literally falling in love. That's absolutely right. Having the vision.
There you go. And you know what's so funny and ironic is we actually started this series on Valentine's Day talking about falling in love with your property, and we're ending a month later. So ladies, this was great. Okay, and if anybody watching this, if you want to watch all 4 parts, go back in our playlist for right here on House to Home. You can watch all of it, take notes, ask us questions, make sure to email us, call Liz and Gina over at RE/MAX Diamond Realty Guam. Trust me, they are this nice and this knowledgeable in real life. I've sat with them and they'll talk about this stuff for days.
Yep, days.
All right, so enjoy your brand new home, everybody. We hope you've gotten a lot out of this series. I know I have. Ladies, thank you so much. And we're going to talk about hopefully Gina goes back to criticizing the government of Guam. Let's call it that next week.
No, next week we're going to talk about sellers.
Sellers.
Sellers, okay. So sellers.
The other side of the coin.
Yeah, seller, not wine sellers, but property sellers.
Resellers, that's right.
All right, bye, ladies.
Thank you.
Bye.
House to Home, presented by RE/MAX Diamond Realty.